Welcome to today's deep dive. Have you ever completely given up on something? Like you just assumed it was a total loss, but then out of nowhere, the environment shifts and it miraculously just, roars back to life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it happens all the time, but it's funny because it really challenges our whole baseline for what it means to nurture something. We are so conditioned to think that intervention is always the answer.
Right. Like if something is failing, we have to immediately step in and fix it.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the focus of today's deep dive. We are looking at a single, really fascinating journal entry. It's dated May 2, 2026.
Titled Notes on Gardening, Part 883.
Right. And it's by an author named Ang. And, on the surface, it just reads like a pretty straightforward update about a balcony garden.
Yeah, just routine notes.
But our mission today is to really unpack the life cycle of this one accidental plant. We want to discover what a single, basically forgotten pot of dirt can teach you about observation, environmental triggers, and really just the hidden mechanics of survival.
It's such a great case study because it gives us this perfect timeline of a biological crisis and then, recovery.
Yeah, and Ang even notes that this plant, it just automatically returned from the dead, which, is quite the mystery story. So let's set the scene a bit. Ang is what I would call a highly pragmatic gardener.
Oh, definitely. Very practical.
Like they explicitly note in the journal that they aren't really into hunting down rare exotics,
Yeah.
right? Or even expanding the garden much.
No, their current focus is purely on routine maintenance, just taking care of and propagating what they already have, which is a really important detail.
Right. They aren't looking to coddle some fragile new plant.
Hmm.
But despite that, a new arrival sneaks in anyway. The subject of our deep dive is a Caladium humboldtii.
Such an interesting plant.
Yeah. And Ang describes it as a hitchhiker. It basically tagged along with a completely different plant purchase, which Ang actually documented way back at part 707 of the journal.
Which happens a lot, actually.
I was going to ask about that. This plant is kind of like getting a rogue curly fry at the bottom of your takeout bag.
That is exactly what it's like.
But then you immediately drop the curly fry.
Right, because almost immediately after this little hitchhiker arrives, it hits this massive environmental wall.
The heat wave.
The heat wave, yeah. Between January and February, a severe heat wave hits the area. And Ang mentions doing little to no watering on the front balcony where this pot was sitting.
And the results are, pretty much what you'd expect. The leaves of this little caladium just wilt, and then they vanish entirely.
Just gone.
Yeah. Ang looks at the pot, sees empty dirt, and assumes the plant is a total goner.
Which, from a visual standpoint, makes complete sense. We judge plants by their leaves. No leaves, so I think it's dead.
But I want to push back on Ang's actions here. Or, lacks of action. Isn't it funny how quickly we just write things off?
Oh, totally. We just assume the worst.
Right. Ang completely abandons this pot on the blazing balcony for moons. That's a direct quote from the journal. They just left it there for moons. Didn't even bother to check for root rot. So I have to ask, was that neglect actually a stroke of luck?
It was incredibly lucky because what looks like a dead plant to us is actually a brilliant survival strategy by the Caladium. We have to look beneath the soil at the tuber.
Okay, the tuber. Break that down for us.
So Caladiums propagate via tubers, which are basically these thick underground stems. And during that heat wave, the plant was in crisis. The hot air was pulling water out of its leaves.
Evaporating it all.
Exactly. Losing water through the leaves way faster than the roots could take it in from that dry balcony soil.
So it's literally drying out from the top down.
Yes. So, to protect that vital underground tuber, the plant made a choice. It entered a dormancy phase. It basically sacrificed the leaves to save the core.
Wait, let's unpack this. If Ang had intervened, like if they kept watering that seemingly dead dirt during the heat wave to try and, save it, would the plant have actually drowned in root rot?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Wait, really? Just from watering it?
Yeah, because the plant was dormant. It wasn't actively pulling up water. If Ang had soaked the dirt, that water would just sit there. The tuber would have rotted away. Leaving the pot completely dry is exactly what prevented the root rot that Ang never even bothered to check for.
That is wild. So is dormancy essentially the plant's version of going into a bunker and locking the door?
That's a perfect way to put it. It locks the door and just waits. It shuts down its systems and waits out the danger.
Wow. Okay, so the tuber is safely locked in its bunker in the dry dirt. But, a plant can't stay dormant forever, right?
No, eventually it needs to wake up. But it won't just wake up randomly. It needs a highly specific set of environmental signals.
They're Gregors.
Exactly. Which, thankfully, suddenly arrived from the sky.
The weather flipped.
It completely flipped. The journal notes that the heat wave finally ends and a relentless rainy season begins.
And Aang mentions this is heavy rain, like 2 or 3 sessions of heavy rain a day for months.
Which completely changes the game. That brings a massive spike in humidity. Aang actually notes a huge surge of new growth across the entire garden.
But it wasn't just the rain that saved our little hitchhiker.
Yeah.
Right? Because something else happened to that specific pot.
Right, and this is pure chance. The pot, which Aang still thinks is just full of dead dirt, is repurposed. Aang needs to transplant some peacock flowers.
The Caesalpinia pulcherrima.
Right, the peacock flowers. And because of this transplanting, the pot gets moved. It goes from the blazing hot front balcony to a shaded area near the front entrance.
Ah, so it's like the plant was waiting for the perfect spot treatment.
A spa treatment, yeah.
I mean, it went from a blazing bone-dry balcony to this shaded, highly humid oasis. How crucial was that specific combination? Like the peacock flowers shaded spot plus the relentless rain, was that the key to automatically waking it up?
It was the only way it was going to wake up. That specific combination is everything.
Right.
The constant daily moisture from the rain tells the tuber that the drought is over.
Right.
But the shade is just as important. If it had stayed in the sun, the soil would dry out between storms, and the plant would get mixed signals. The shade kept it consistently cool and moist.
Like the all-clear signal. The coast is clear, you can leave the bunker.
Exactly. Under those highly humid, constantly moist, and shaded conditions, the tuber finally commits. And suddenly, 2 distinct caladium shoots sprout up right next to the peacock flowers.
The dramatic reveal. I love it. So now that it has 2 actual shoots, Aang realizes exactly what they're dealing with, and this completely changes how they treat this hitchhiker moving forward.
Because now Aang can see the leaves. And they point out a really crucial detail in the journal. This specific Caladium humboldtii is a dwarf variety.
Okay, dwarf variety, meaning it's just naturally small.
Right. Aang explicitly notes that despite its small size, these are mature plants. They are not fragile seedlings.
Which is such a funny irony, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to look at a tiny plant and want to baby it,
Yeah.
to think, oh, it's just a weak little seedling. But Aang realizes, no, this is a fully grown, battle-tested survivor. It survived a severe heat wave in a dry pot.
Exactly. It's tough. And because Aang recognizes what it really is, they plan out the next steps. They're going to transplant the caladium shoots into their own new pot.
Give it its own space.
Yeah, separate from the peacock flowers. But Aang knows they need to mimic the exact conditions that woke it up in the first place. That high humidity, even moisture.
Right. Keep the spa treatment going.
Right. So Aang is considering a few strategies. One is using leeka balls on the soil surface.
Oh, leeka balls. Those are the little expanded clay pebbles, right?
Yeah, they hold on to moisture really well and help increase the humidity right around the leaves without making the soil totally waterlogged.
Okay, so that's one option.
And the other option Aang mentions is if the plant stays out on the balcony, building a mini glass greenhouse or a terrarium setup.
So by looking into leca balls and terrariums, Aang is essentially trying to artificially bottle that relentless rainy season.
That's exactly what they're doing. They saw what naturally broke the dormancy, the constant moisture, the humidity, and they are trying to recreate that microclimate permanently.
That is so smart. It's just a brilliant observation of cause and effect, and it really brings the whole journey of this little plant into focus.
It really does.
I mean, let's just recap what this Caladium humboldtii went through. It starts as this ignored little hitchhiker. Then it turns into a shriveled, apparent goner baking on a bone-dry balcony.
But secretly surviving by locking itself in tuber dormancy.
Right, surviving in its bunker. And then it gets a triumphant 2-shoot resurrection, entirely triggered by a shift to a rainy, shaded environment.
And finally, it earns its own dedicated terrarium. It's a pretty epic arc for a pot of dirt.
It really is. And I think there is such a powerful lesson here for you listening. Because, we always want to fix things. But sometimes doing absolutely nothing, just letting a situation sit undisturbed for moons, is exactly what's needed.
Yeah, you have to allow natural resilience to take its course. Intervention isn't always the cure. Sometimes neglect is exactly the environment a system needs to protect itself.
Exactly. And that leaves us with a really provocative thought to mull over today, because we've spent this whole deep dive talking about a dormant, completely invisible tuber surviving a brutal heat wave, just waiting for the weather to change.
Just biding its time.
Right. So it makes you wonder, what dormant tubers might be hiding in your own life?
Oh, I like that.
Right? Like what projects or ideas or environments have you totally written off as a total loss? Maybe they aren't dead. Maybe they're just dormant, hiding under the surface, just waiting for the right spiked humidity and a little bit of shade to finally sprout.
You never know what's waiting to wake up.
You really don't.
Oh.
Keep an eye on those empty pots. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.